How's it going, everyone? It is Skullzi here with the latest and the greatest gaming news. Today we're going to be talking about The Elder Scrolls 6 and we're going to be using Cyberpunk 2077 as kind of an important observation piece in regards to just bugginess in general with very large open world games and just how the future of The Elder Scrolls 6 might be, judging by Cyberpunk 2077. And I know Cyberpunk is made by CD Projekt Red, a developer who makes different games than the types of RPGs that Bethesda Game Studios makes, but one thing we do need to keep in mind here is that Cyberpunk 2077 is somewhat similar to a Bethesda Game Studios style open world RPG. It's first person, it has similar dynamics, and it has a very large open world. However, the open worlds vary differently depending on a few different important things, but there are some important observations we can make when we compare Cyberpunk 2077 to Bethesda Game Studios games in general, and then we can take all of this and think on how The Elder Scrolls 6 might be as well. And obviously the first and most important aspect that I could bring up regarding these two games is the bugginess, because it seems like everyone targeted Bethesda Game Studios as being the main studio to make buggy games at launch in regards to open world RPGs like this. Bethesda Game Studios has basically become the living meme in regards to how they launch buggy games, Fallout 76 being a pretty good example of this because it did launch in a pretty buggy state. However, it is fixed now, but that isn't the point. The point is, most every single one of Bethesda Game Studios games has launched with some pretty severe bugs, some even game-breaking. And even though these bugs do get patched later on, the fact is these games were released with game-breaking bugs, which are the worst kind of bugs, and that's not even mentioning all the little visual issues and other tiny things like disappearing things from your inventory and stuff like that that has become synonymous with a Bethesda Game Studios open world RPG. However, with all that in mind, people still love their games. People still love Bethesda Game Studios RPGs. However, it's still accepted that their games are buggy, especially when they're initially released. However, now seeing how Cyberpunk 2077 was launched, I kinda wonder if that tune will change, because Cyberpunk is definitely on the same level with bugs as a Bethesda Game Studios game. There are some game-breaking bugs as well, however most of the bugs seem to be centric on the earlier generation of consoles, meaning the Xbox One and the PS4. The PS5, the Xbox Series X, and the good PCs are all running this game without that many issues. However, even the best PC will still have some bugs. While these bugs on the best systems won't be game-breaking for the most part, there will be like a lot of visual bugs, but most of them are related to texture pop-in. Generally, when you're driving around the city, it seems like everything will pop in initially with a low polygon texture, and then the higher resolution textures will load in on top of that, which is definitely noticeable and can break the immersion factor. And at least from my personal experience, I am getting less game-breaking bugs with Cyberpunk 2077 than I had with Bethesda Game Studios games at launch. However, I am definitely getting like triple the amount of visual bugs and just anomalies like that. And to be honest, in some way, I almost would rather have the rare game-breaking bug, because as long as I can just load up a previous save before the bug happened, that would be fine. But with all the visual issues in Cyberpunk, it is definitely immersion breaking, which kinda sucks because the game is highly immersive. Now keep in mind, I still do really like Cyberpunk 2077, and it is one of my favorite games of all time despite all the issues, but there is a definite change in the climate here in regards to open world RPGs, because I think it would be unfair, ignorant, and definitely a bit blind if you still consider and target Bethesda Game Studios as being like the living meme of launching a massive game with issues, because now CD Projekt Red is right there alongside Todd Howard and friends with launching games with issues like this. And it kind of makes me wonder at this point, is it a testament to maybe the game being rushed, because CD Projekt Red does seem like they did rush Cyberpunk 2077 out the gate a bit. There were developers saying that the game needed like 6 more months of development time. However, this wasn't believed back then because it was just a random leak and obviously wasn't verified, because what developer would go out on a record and say that if they wanted to keep their job? But I can't help but wonder if maybe massive open world RPGs like this will just always have these types of issues unless they're in development for like 10 freaking years, because Cyberpunk was in development for even longer than most Bethesda Game Studios games actually have in development. And with all that in mind, the game still launched with all these issues. Bear in mind though that Night City in Cyberpunk is probably one of the best and most believable and most dense cities I have ever seen in any type of video game ever, especially an open world RPG like this. Night City is a believable city and it is huge, but there is a give and take to that because the characters, or at least I would say the random NPCs in Night City, are at a huge disadvantage when compared to the random NPCs that you find in the game world in Bethesda Game Studios games. In BGS open world games, you could pretty much talk to everyone. Everyone has almost unique dialogue, except for like the most generic and kind of just decorative NPCs who really don't have much of a purpose, but even they would have almost their own unique dialogue and schedule and purpose. The NPCs in Cyberpunk 2077, apart from like the side quest NPCs or your quest givers or characters in the main story, all the people you see walking around seem like their AI is very, very basic. In fact, even the cars won't drive around roadblocks, they just kind of sit there and beep their horn. People will even just immediately duck down in the middle of a gunfight without running for cover. The AI seems very basic. However, the AI and low-key characters in Bethesda Game Studios games are on a whole nother level than what we see in Night City. But both games have a pretty moderate, if not large amount of bugs. Personally, because I have a decent PC, I haven't seen too many of them, but the visual bugs do annoy the crap out of me. But for this to be the case for two different respectable studios kinda makes me wonder if perhaps just large RPGs like this will have these issues, or perhaps if maybe it's more centric on the technology behind these issues. Maybe if Cyberpunk 2077 was definitely targeted for next gen and not the previous consoles, maybe we wouldn't see as many issues because then the game could actually be more tailored for next generation technology. Or maybe it's what I said earlier, maybe games as massive as Cyberpunk and BGS open world RPGs just need a lot more time, a lot more development than most games actually get, which kinda sucks because these games are so awesome, and even though we do get a lot more replayability and a longer game lifespan in terms of how long we can actually play this game before we 100% and do everything, even though all that's longer than most games, the wait like 8+ years for a game to release with a minimal amount of bugs but still be as large as these types of games kinda sucks. And CD Projekt Red and Bethesda Game Studios are large developers. It's not like they're small indie teams making these games, but they still spend like 5 to 8 years making a game, and then the game launches with all these issues. And even though Cyberpunk is somewhat of a cross-generation game, and cross-gen games usually do launch with bugs and issues anyway, it seems like every massive game like this will launch with these issues. Even BioWare games have their share of bugs, which are also game-breaking. And even though the majority of the gaming community right now is in a vocal uproar about Cyberpunk and its issues, its glitches, and its bugs, I think a lot of people are forgetting that we see this with a lot of large games like this. Well, that 100% doesn't excuse any of the issues we're seeing in Cyberpunk at all. It's just something important to keep in mind here, because Bethesda Game Studios, like I said at the beginning of this video, has been the target of most of the criticism because their games usually always launch with issues. But now here is Cyberpunk 2077 from CD Projekt Red, a highly acclaimed developer that a lot of people thought were above these types of issues. However, here we are, seeing the same exact level of game-breaking issues and all that kind of stuff here in Cyberpunk 2077. I think one thing we need to keep in mind, maybe when it comes to large open-world RPGs like this, I feel like I said that phrase like 8,000 times in this video, but either way, one thing we need to keep in mind with games like Bethesda Game Studios games or Cyberpunk 2077 is maybe we just need to accept the fact that these games will have bugs and will have issues. Unless the game was in development for 10 to 15 years, it probably won't be perfect, and maybe we should focus on the aspects of the game that we actually enjoy and try not to pay attention to the things we don't enjoy, because even from a life perspective, if you just focused on the negatives on your day-to-day life, that would be a horrible existence. You kinda gotta focus on what makes you happy, especially when it comes to games like this, and again, that doesn't excuse any of the issues. The game should have launched in a better state without as many bugs, but it's just an important thing to keep in mind, especially in regards to just life in general. Either way, I'm enjoying the game. I'm enjoying Cyberpunk 2077. Like I said, it's one of my favorite games of all time. But what I want to know is, what do you think about all of this? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you enjoy the content, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn notifications on. Be sure to share the video if you want to help grow the channel and the community, because sharing videos is the best way to help grow channels and a community. And as always, this video is brought to you by the following amazing people. If you want to get a video shout out like this, you can support the channel over on Ko-fi, Patreon, or here on YouTube as an exclusive channel member. Links for all this and more are down in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next time when you discover that there is one NPC in all of Night City that looks exactly like Todd Howard. But don't let him find you.
It just works.